Hi guys, my name is Avi and today I'm going to be showing you how to colorize your line art. Now, the method I'm going to show you today is in Photoshop, but the exact same method can work in Procreate, Krita, Clip Studio Paint. As long as the drawing application that you're using has layer management as well as clipping mask functionality, then you're good. So let's get to it.
Alright, so I'm in Photoshop and I already have a document prepared for this tutorial. In my layers panel, I can see that I already have all of my elements organized into separate layers. I'm going to select my line art layer and I'm going to create a new layer above it. So there's a plus icon at the bottom of the layers panel. That's the create new layer. Clicking on that will create a layer right above it. I'm going to double click that to rename it to line art color. Great. Now with this new layer, the very first thing I'm going to do is right click on the layer, and from the drop down menu I'm going to select create clipping mask. With that created, I can see that my thumbnail preview of the layer has shifted over to the right slightly, and there's an arrow icon pointing down to my line art layer. This means that my line art color is being clipped and masked by the line art layer. With that done, I'm going to zoom in to my facial area of the illustration. Great. And then I'm going to start my color selection. So I'm going to colorize the line art just around the face. So with that, I'm going to want to select a color specific to that flesh tone. Double clicking on the color swatch over here is going to reveal the color picker. And as I move my mouse away from the color picker window, you can see that the cursor is automatically been changed to the eyedropper tool, which is great. So I'm going to sample a color from the shaded area of the face. And then from there, I'm going to stay within this hue, meaning that I'm not going to touch anything in the hue selection on the right here. All I'm going to do is going to pick a color that's slightly more saturated, so I'm moving a little bit more to the right of where I've already selected, and then something a little bit darker. So I'm just going to move my cursor down below that into something a little bit darker, and that looks good. And then I'm just going to click OK, and I'm going to switch to my brush tool. With the brushes, I recommend using the hard round brush tool. You can play around with the soft round brushes or some other texture brushes, see what works for you, but hard round works best for me for just colorizing the line art and doing the flats for my layers. Now with my brush selected, I can just go ahead and start freely painting in my line art. Now with the clipping mask that we've added to the line art color layer, we can see that I can just start brushing in my colors without paying too much attention to how big my brush size is, or being too careful about where I'm painting. I can just freely just paint over the areas that I need to get painted, and that clipping mask is going to limit what's visible based off of my line art. So there, as you see quickly, I've just colorized the skin tone areas of the face. So I'm gonna go ahead and colorize the lips. So again, the same process, double click on the color swatch to bring up the color picker. I'm gonna sample the shaded area of the lips, and then I'm going to select a color that's a little bit more saturated. So move a little bit to the right, a little bit darker, so a little bit below that. I'll click OK. And then with my brush tool, I'm just gonna quickly brush over that. And that's how you colorize line art, or at least that's the method that I use in Photoshop to colorize my line art.
What's great about this method is that it's non-destructive. This means that you can do whatever you want to your colorized layer and your original art layer is completely unaffected. So you can experiment with different colors, different techniques, mess around with maybe some gradients if you like, and your original artwork is always the same.
Now, one tip that I have is that you should wait to colorize your line art until you're near the end of your illustration. So you can see in the document that I have here, I already have all of my shading, all of my rendering completed. And that allows me to accurately select colors that's going to work with my shading. If I started this process while I was still in my flats, the color selection would be off. So to show you what I mean by that, I'm going to expand my color layer. I'm going to hide all of my shading and rendering. And then I'm just going to navigate back to my line art color, collapse my color folder. And I'm going to start doing the same process of selecting a color. So again, open up the color picker, sample the hair area, and then I'm going to use a color that's a little bit more saturated. Move to the right, and then a little bit darker. Move down, click OK, looks good, and then I'm going to start colorizing my lines. And this looks all right. You know, I can see my line art while still giving sort of the illusion of a more textured look to the illustration, which is why you want to colorize your lines to begin with. And just color this large area here. Okay, awesome. So I'm not going to color more than that. And then I'm going to bring back my shading. So I'm going to expand my colors. And let's say I started this process just by colorizing from my flats. And now I just went through the process of shading my entire illustration. And what you're going to find is that the color that we use to colorize the line art is completely faded into the background. We lose all that definition that we had from our original inks. And instead, we sort of just get this free-flowing look, which if that's a look you want to achieve, there are faster ways to doing that. You wouldn't even bother to do your inking layer. You would have just gone straight into flatting and shading, but we still want that definition from the inking layer. So what you really want to do is select a color based off the shading you apply to your illustration. So I'm going to go open up my color picker. I'm going to select the shaded area of the hair, and then you can see that the color is a more deeper purple that we have. So I'm going to select something that's a little bit more saturated, a little bit darker, click OK, and then start brushing that in. And then you can see we've got that definition back from our inks, while still having a color that's a little softer from a deep black, giving us sort of a textured feel to our line art. Now, my second tip is that you don't necessarily have to colorize everything in your illustration. You want to keep some of those original blacks. And I'm not just talking about the glasses or her eyelashes, because those things would typically come across as black in the illustration to begin with. I'm talking about areas that you would think you would want to colorize, but ultimately won't do you any good. So a prime example of that is this collar area, this blue collar. I'm going to go ahead, sample the shaded area of the blue collar, and then click. I'm going to have to pick a more saturated color, then something a little bit darker. Great. Start brushing that in. Looks good, except when I hit this area and I start colorizing that shadow, what happens is that we lost all definition from that shaded area. What you want to be mindful of is making sure that you only colorize what's absolutely necessary. So I'm going to select my eraser tool. I'm going to go ahead and erase the overlapping shadow that we had. And when I zoom out, that reads a lot better. We can see the depth of the color while maintaining some sort of a textured look with the blue lines.
And that's how you colorize your line art. It's a really straightforward and simple process that also allows you a lot of control, a lot of flexibility. So have fun playing around with that. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If there's any topics you'd like me to cover, drop a suggestion in the comment section below. Until next time.